Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, I chat with Jay Moberly. Jay is a retired robbery homicide detective from Los Angeles Police Department. Robbery homicide is one of the most elite investigative units in the country, I'd say, for all police departments. Jay's got a ton of experience, a ton of great stories. The main thing we get into is a quadruple homicide that he was the lead investigator on. It's just fascinating to hear how a crime this intense, an investigation this large, gets investigated and ultimately solved. Really fun interview. I was really lucky that Jay was able to give me some of his time to be interviewed. I'm thankful for that. And without further ado, here's episode number 19.
This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Jay Moberly, thank you for coming on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I know you were an LAPD police officer for a long, long time. You started when you were like 13 or something, right? There was some program for the city.
That's why I'm only 25 now. Yeah. I entered the academy 19 days before my 21st birthday. And I retired at 35 years later.
Wow. And even before that, you did a program with the city that
I did.
Got you involved, right?
I did. I was what they call a student worker, police student worker. It was a program for college students, designed it to what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of hang on to, generate interest with young, mostly males back in those days.
Right.
But, there were females starting to come on the job as well. But what the deal was, you had to be going to school, carrying a certain amount of units during the school year, and you could only work 20 hours. And it gave me a lot of insight into the admin side of the department that I would have never gotten otherwise, because I never worked an inside job. And the staff side of it. During the summer, you could work full time and didn't have to go to school.
Okay.
So it was a great job. I did that for 2.5 years, and I went straight into the academy after going through the background process and all that.
That's a good program, because then that way too they get to get a feel for you and if you're a good fit. And
it's a great program. I think they still have it to this day, but I know it was discontinued for a long time. But I tell you what, there's not short of, and again, education goes along with it because you're required to be going to school,
right?
But short of maybe a military background or something like that, you really can't get much better insight into LAPD anyway. Short of a program like that. I thought it was terrific. I learned a lot from it.
That's awesome. Now, you ended your career as a robbery homicide detective, correct?
I did.
Okay. And that and this might be a stupid question, but I think other people might have it in their head too. Is robbery homicide, is that different than straight up homicide?
Well, in LAPD, there's 21 geographical areas now. On the East Coast, you would call them precincts.
Okay.
We call them divisions or stations. And in every one of those 22 or 21 divisions, there is a robbery section in the Detective Bureau, and there's a homicide section. Then, in addition to that, in those geographic areas, the detectives only investigate crimes that occur within their boundaries of their so one portion of the city.
Okay.
In robbery homicide, the Robbery Homicide Division, which is out of downtown Los Angeles, it's hand-picked detectives that have to apply for it and have to have a certain amount of experience and so forth, pass an interview and everything.
Is it true they give you a poly for that?
Not for robbery homicide, they don't.
Okay.
They do for narcotics, to apply for a narcotics job.
I heard that. I thought that was weird, polying cops, like on the job.
It is. It's. I've never taken a polygraph. I've given them to a ton of people, but I've never. I say give them. I mean, I had them given.
Right.
But for narcotics, and I think for certain other undercover type assignments, they're pretty secretive, but not for robbery homicide.
Okay.
But anyway, robbery homicide division, getting back to that, has a homicide section, homicide special section, robbery special section, and a sex crimes section. Now, the detectives assigned to those sections of robbery homicide have citywide jurisdiction. Basically, they can pick cases from wherever they want. They also are designated by the chief of police to handle certain crimes, and it's usually, VIP type things, high profile, those sort of deals.
Okay.
And crimes against police officers.
Okay, that's interesting. Jay, can you think back and remember your first hot call you responded to when you were a young patrol officer?
I can, and I think I only had... My first assignment was Hollywood Division in January of 1976 when I graduated from the 5-month academy at that time. Went to what we called morning watch at that time, which was essentially midnight to 8, 11 at night, 7 in the morning, something like that. And as a 21-year-old kid, it was kind of a shock for me because I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, never been south of the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah, you grew up kind of on a farm, right?
No, not really, but it was a half acre. My dad and I did raise cattle and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of an unusual upbringing for a city kid, but my dad was an old Missouri farm boy and
that's cool. Yeah,
raised his own animals. We ate our animals, and except our dogs, of course. But
right.
It was great. It was a unique sort of a thing.
That is cool.
Most of the kids I went to school with, though, probably 99% of them were never exposed to that kind of stuff.
Right.
They were just regular track homes kind of things, But anyway, so the call we got came out as a 415 man with a gun, meaning 415 is the penal code section for disturbing the peace, causing some sort of a problem. And, obviously somebody had called in saying this guy had a gun. So when we get there, again, this is my first or second night in a division working as a real police officer now.
Wow.
And it is amazing. I don't care how much play acting you do in the police academy, nothing prepares you for the real deal. Not in reality. It gives you a foundation, but you have to get the experience from there. And I'm sure any police officer would tell you that.
Sure.
You know that as well. You
Yeah.
know? But anyway, what it turned out to be, we were confronted by the person who was described in the call. He had a hold of, and he looked like a long-time criminal, ex-con. He just had that look, kind of like he grew up out in the Mojave Desert somewhere and crawled out from underneath a rock, and out of some bar. It was some bar, and he had a hold of a transvestite, and there was some sort of kind of a fight going on.
Okay.
And I'm following. We deploy. I'm the passenger. I get out, deploy the shotgun, and we're both. My partner is ordering him to drop whatever it is he has. I couldn't see anything at that point. I never did see a gun. So, then I heard something metal, and I'm getting very close. If the guy does the wrong thing, because he's described to have a gun and the way he's acting, very irrational, very aggressive. Didn't know if he was going to harm the person that he had a hold of or try to harm us or what. But I heard something metal hit a bumper of a car that he was standing next to.
Yeah.
Like I said, he kind of had the person he had as a hostage, if you want to go that route, between us. But when he became visible to me and I could see his hands, they were clearly nothing in them. And as it turned out, he had dropped a knife. He had a knife, not a gun.
Okay.
And from that, I learned that when people want the police to respond real quick, they say he's got a gun. That just happens. So
that's
the guy
brutal.
It's the reality of police work, as I'm sure you know. So, right. I'm glad I didn't have to shoot the guy, but in reality, if I had to, it was, it could have happened.
Yeah, that must have been, I can't imagine what was going through your head the second night on the job. You got a shotgun pointed at a guy.
Yeah, a shotgun was not unfamiliar to me because I've been hunting since I was a kid and handling shotguns. But to point it at another human being, and I'm not I was in the Air National Guard, but I didn't do any combat time. And
sure,
to point it at another human being was something altogether different for me.
Oh, imagine. What did you guys carry for? Were you doing slugs or buckshot or
double-aught buck?
Okay,
four rounds of double-aught buck. We carried the shotgun unloaded with 4 rounds in the magazine back then. So when you got out, you chambered around if you were going to deploy the shotgun.
Gotcha. So with buckshot, you're not. It's not exactly precision if you're not close enough.
No, it's not. And I recall the statistics back then. Most of our shootings with shotguns were misses because officers incorrectly thought that they could just kind of point in the general direction and let it go.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But if you're close, like you and me are sitting right now, as I'm sure you know, you've got a little pattern coming out for several feet that's about the diameter of maybe a quarter,
right,
or
nice and
twice
tight.
that. So you can easily miss somebody.
Sure.
That's how it works.
Jay, can you describe or tell us about the most bizarre thing you dealt with on the job?
Well, there was a lot of bizarre stuff, but the worst thing I ever had to deal with was a quadruple homicide that I was one of the 2 lead investigators on in 2002. It's a long, convoluted story, of course, but very complicated. But to boil it down, 4 members of the same family, a Hindu-Indian family, a 16-year-old girl, her 18-year-old brother, their aunt, who they consider to be like a mother.
Mm-hmm.
No, I take that back. It was their mother. I apologize. And the grandmother were all bound, gagged, and burned to death inside of a home up in the Hollywood Hills. And when my partner and I got assigned the case, I mean, it was a big call out. There was a lot of specialized people out there, and forensics and fire and all that kind of stuff. And
I can't imagine that crime scene.
it came out as a house fire. I mean, it started out as a house fire. There was news footage of it, and the husband who had come home and discovered this fire was obviously a prime suspect right from the start, because he just didn't happen to be there and so forth. But long story short, he had nothing to do with it. It all turned out to be related to a business dispute that this family was having with 2 Hindu-Indian brothers that they considered to be friends, or at least associates, that they could work this little situation they had out. And the whole dispute was over a piece of land not much bigger than the typical tract home's driveway. It all had to do with access to both parties had hotels in Studio City.
Okay.
Which is a very lucrative place to have hotels, obviously. It's near downtown Los Angeles. It's near Studio City. I mean, it's near Universal Studios, which is a very popular tourist attraction. The victim family's hotel was a decent hotel. You would take your family there. The suspect's hotel, the 2 brothers that were involved in this, and there was a third party also, you wouldn't be caught dead there. It was a dump. And both parties wanted to remodel their hotels. I mean, there was millions of dollars virtually at stake.
Okay.
And they had found out during their upgrade proposal that there was a piece of land accessible to was actually city property that the suspect's family had kind of claimed way back when. So that was, I know that's kind of a short explanation, but that was the whole nucleus of the dispute. And to the victim's family, they thought they were working it out civilly. They were having court proceedings, and the woman of the victim's family, Geeta Kumar was her name, she was handling this business deal for the victim's family, which offended the 2 males involved in the suspects, because in their culture, women are second-class citizens, and they shouldn't be doing quote-unquote man's business, is how they put it. Long story short, they had a pending hearing coming up in court, which in hindsight, the victim's family probably would have been victorious on, and that would have given them the access they needed. It would have caused the 2 suspects problems in enlarging their hotel. So after a couple of attempts to scare them to death, to get them to move out of the country or something, which didn't work, they ultimately went up and murdered these people. And, it was 3 days into it, it was a complete whodunit. The motive did not become clear for this until, the family, the surviving family members never pointed towards the 2 thugs that actually ended up doing it.
Really? So they didn't think
idea.
they would ever stoop to that?
No. I mean, look at it. They're all Hindu Indians. They had that bond between them, and they thought that we're working this out. I mean, they had hotels right next to each other. They saw each other almost on a daily basis, and so to them, it was just something they had to figure out. And they mentioned it kind of almost in passing, as anything that's going on in their life, But we got a break 3 days into it, And from there, led to a wiretap, a lot of surveillance.
What was the break?
The break was actually one of the thugs that had been contracted by these killers to go up and initially scare these people to death, try and get them to move out of the country.
So they didn't do it themselves. They hired...
No, they did do it. Ultimately did do it themselves, but they tried to do it using other people to begin with.
Okay.
They paid two different groups of people to go up and put the fear of God into these people, and hopefully they would just leave the country. The victim's family had been robbed years and years ago when they first came to this country, and they'd been tied up, and it was a real scary situation for them. So I think the suspects thought, if this happens to them again, they'll just take their bags and go.
Oh my goodness!
After that didn't work, then the murder occurs. The two brothers that had the neighboring hotel and a third individual. Well, one of the thugs, he was an ex-Mongol gang member, motorcycle gang member, was watching the news, and he saw this news footage, and he recognized the house as one that he had been contracted to go up to. Now, this guy's not, motorcycle Mongol gang members aren't known to be cooperative with the police.
Yeah.
And he was not anxious to be cooperative with the police. In fact, he didn't want to be. But he couldn't handle the fact that they were putting out that there were two kids murdered in this crime.
So he had some kind of morals deep inside.
He had a heart underneath it all, yeah. So he contacted a newsman that was an ex-LAPD sergeant, who I happened to know, and said, hey, are you out there at this crime scene, so to speak? And yeah. And so he met with him and said, I got some information for you, but I don't want to meet I'm not going to talk to the police. So he went and met with this newsman. His name is Rod Burnson. I think he's still a news broadcaster somewhere. But anyway, so he tracked me down, asked me if I was working that case because he knew I was working robbery homicide, and it went from there. Burnson coaxed this guy and his friend to meet with us. After we met with them, we kind of gained their trust a little bit. But it was a long, long haul to get all the information we needed,
Yeah.
It was a lengthy investigation. I mean, we made an arrest about 3 months later, which was very rewarding to me because I got, my partner and I both got to be friends with this family. I mean, they were nice people, great people, generous people, and they, unlike most of the murders that happen at least in the city of Los Angeles, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but a lot of murder victims have something to do that lends to their demise. They're either dope dealers, they're gang members, they're robbers, whatever it might be.
Right.
You don't have a ton of innocent people, for lack of a better word, getting murdered. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are.
And they always put that in the news to make people feel better. They always say this was targeted violence.
Yeah, and of course, now and then when you have your gang shootings and stuff, some poor innocent person standing across the street catches a bullet. Those things happen, of course. But typically, the murders in Los Angeles are criminal versus criminal. And but again, not always. You have your jewelry store robberies and things like that where, the merchant is murdered.
Right.
But this one, these people had nothing to do with that lent to their death, and they were nice people, good people. I mean, living the American dream. They came here from India with nothing, and they had become millionaires through the hotel business.
Wow.
And they were and he had a 16-year-old girl, which at that time looked like a darker-skinned and darker-haired version of my daughter, who was only 2 years older than her at that time. It was nightmarish, to say the least. I mean, I wanted to, I never wanted to solve a crime as bad as I did that one. And you want to solve them all. But we got lucky. We were very fortunate, and there's now 2 out of the 3 of the individuals that did it are on death row. The third one is doing 15 to life or something like that.
Okay.
So it was a long haul, though. I learned a lot from that case, and I still keep in touch with the Kumar family to this day.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure you guys formed a real bond over solving that.
They are. Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, I don't know how a lot of other folks handle it, but, investigating homicides, you can't help but get, your heart goes out to the victims' families. And that's, in my mind, that's where my obligation came in, was you're the first of all, you're a spokesperson for the dead, and you're the victim's family's advocate, because you can't just do your job an 8-hour day and go home. It's an around the clock, whenever you're needed, whatever you can do kind of thing. And it's rewarding. It's challenging, but it's extremely rewarding. That was I had a lot of, probably had, probably 100 or so murders that I investigated as one of the lead detectives, and easily a couple hundred more than that as some part of the investigation,
Right.
But that stands out.
With quadruple homicide.
Yeah.
That's rare.
It is very rare. I think the last quadruple homicide LA had was the Hollywood Hills murders involving the porn star Johnny Holmes.
Oh yeah,
way back in the not 60s but 70s, probably middle 70s. That's the last quadruple.
And you mentioned
people
hiring someone to murder someone. What was the going rate back then? Do you know? Or do you know what I'm just curious what people put on the human life.
I had one murder for hire where the person that contracted the murder paid the killer $4,000.
Well, that's short money.
It is, and it's that's actually quite a bit for a lot of murder for hires
because they're desperate people.
Angeles.
Probably.
Yeah, a lot of your contract killers are either gang members or they don't go to Disneyland to find a contract killer.
Right. People are, I think, when they think contract killer, in my mind anyways, they have like a Armani suit on, leather gloves, and a 9mm the silencer.
Right.
These are not that's not the case.
not typically here in Los Angeles.
Right.
I'm not saying those things don't occur, but a lot of your contract killings are, an angry wife that goes to a local bar and starts asking around, or vice versa. That kind of thing, and it's usually somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. So
that is,
they typically go like that.
I understand the act of murder, like murdering someone. I think anybody who's been in a fight understands murdering someone. Like, I can understand how it happens in the heat of the moment. You kill somebody.
Sure.
But to premeditate and to hire someone is so, and especially kids, it's so sick.
I can't fathom it. There's been a lot of these types of cases, but if you remember the Dr. Jeffrey McDonald murders back in 1969 in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay.
An Army doctor. He was a Green Beret. He's still in prison to this day. Jeffrey McDonald's his name. There was a book written on it, and I can't remember the name of the book, but it was written by a guy named Joe McDonald. Great book. It outlines the case. This doctor, Army doctor, murdered his wife and his 2 daughters. And in probably what was a fit of rage, more than likely. Nobody will ever know because he won't even admit doing it. He then stabbed himself strategically in a place where he knew he would ultimately survive, but it would look like the stage that he wanted it to look like.
Geez.
He patterned it after the Manson murders in '69. He even described some floppy-hatted hippie girl that came into the house, and the whole deal. And I had my oldest daughter at that time was the same age as his 2-year-old daughter, and he went into, after killing his wife and his older daughter, who was 6, he walked into his other child's room, got her out of her crib, put her across his lap, put his flannel shirt over her back, and stabbed her 42 times with an ice pick. Now, what kind of an animal can do something like that? I think, and I only talk about this because I look at people a lot like my mom and my dad, God rest their souls. They were so naive. To them, that's something that they were only happened in movies.
Right.
But some people are like that. They're out there. It's documented. Believe it.
Yeah, there's evil out there for sure.
It's horrible. No, it's horrible, But anyway, back to, your reward as a homicide detective, if there is one, is to solve a case like that and bring some kind of closure for the family.
What did that look like the day you grabbed the guy? How did it go down?
Oh, the arrest of the multi-4?
Did a warrant go out, or did you get to do it yourself?
No, we actually directed it. We had a multifaceted operation going on because we had 2 locations that we hit. Actually, what happened was it sort of went down before we were completely ready for it to. We had a wiretap going. We had surveillance crews in place.
Like a wiretap on their phone.
A lot of phones, several phones. And what happened was the two Indian brothers who were the main, they had the motive to kill the other family. There was a third person involved, a male Hispanic, who he had the contacts for all these Mongol thugs that they tried to hire to get this job done. Not to kill them, supposedly, but to go up and beat them up or scare them, rob them, do whatever, and get them to try and move out of town, conveniently right before their trial was coming up, so that they'd be the winners by default, you know. We could tell by what we were hearing on the wiretaps that they were now going to kill him because they were afraid he was going to get weak and rat, which in effect he had done, but he wasn't. He had given us pieces of things that we knew fit. It's too lengthy to go back into detail, but he had the vehicle that we actually captured on a video up at the crime scene.
Okay.
With they had taken the license plates off, and
so he had some skin in the game here.
He did. Oh, big time. He was at the scene. He was a participant in the murders. But when we arrested him, and we arrested him first, we had his jail cell wired, of course, and we were listening to him, and he started talking about how he was entrapped into this thing, and it was, he was forced to do it, and blah blah blah, all these kind of things. Well, prior to arresting him, it was obvious that the brothers were planning to kill him because we'd been out to talk to him too many times, and they figured that he would crack. So that plot led him to try and flee, and we had to arrest everybody at one time. So it was in the middle of one of our detectives' retirement parties. Actually, it happened in the middle of the night.
Really?
Yeah, it was about 10 o'clock at night, and so we had to send crews out to 2 different locations. We had to, have him picked up, all kinds of things. Those things, it kind of spontaneously combusted, if you will.
I gotcha.
But it all went well. It went good.
Wow. So these 2 brothers, did they have a history of crime, or is this their first caper?
No, the one brother had one arrest for a battery. He had punched somebody in a fight or something.
Okay.
The other brother was evil. He was purely evil. It was his idea to kill everybody, and he had done exactly the same thing in a business dispute with an individual several years prior, actually my memory serves me, about 15 years prior, and he should have gone to prison. He shot a guy, tied up a guy in the house, shot him, set the house on fire, and left him for dead. But the guy didn't die. He got out of his binds and got free.
Whoa.
And
how is this guy walking the streets?
Well, that's a good question. For whatever reason, and we could never determine, his name was Peter Govan. Peter Govan was allowed to plead guilty to some lesser offense. Now, the victim in that case wasn't an angel either. He was a criminal as well. But nonetheless, there's no way he should have gotten what he was convicted of ultimately, and he never went to trial. He did 2 years in jail, 2 years in prison, and that was it. He was out.
Holy cow.
So he figured it worked for him once. It can work again.
The judicial system is amazing, because how many people do you know, like good law-abiding people, like in your life?
Sure.
They think if they get caught with like a bag of pot when it was illegal or whatever, they think they're going away.
Sure.
But then you see the reality of it. That doesn't...
It's sad. I mean, the whole judicial system here, especially in California, to me, we're so weak on crime. Now with Prop 47 and all these different things, I mean, you got a real pro-criminal element, if you will, running this whole state, basically.
Massachusetts is like the little brother.
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, it's just
California.
Awful. And I know that the system is extremely overloaded, so they have to plea these cases out whenever they can, that kind of thing. But the cost of that is having things like guys like this fall through the cracks. And he ends up, the reason why these 4 people are dead today. It's disgusting.
It's terrifying. So much, so much trauma for the family, even for the investigators. That really, like, Dave Escoto came on the podcast.
Did he?
It was a really fun interview.
Yeah.
Dave is a funny guy.
Yeah.
But he had he was talking about trauma for going to calls, and the one thing that really bothered him was similar to what you're saying. He had to do he had to go for an autopsy. I think it was an autopsy or to view a body, and it was a girl, his daughter's exact age.
Oh boy! Yeah,
he said that was the one time in his career he stepped back and felt a little felt a little dizzy, and his partner said, "Hey, why don't we walk outside?" And he had a real issue with it. It got to him for a couple days. He said couldn't stop thinking about it.
Well, I've been to dozens of autopsies, and you get, I don't want to say you get used to them, but you get a little hardened to them. But until you'd walk in there, and I mean, there's bodies virtually laying everywhere.
Yeah.
But when you see a baby, when I saw a baby on a gurney, or a child, and I saw enough of those, I mean, that upset me for a long time too. I know where Dave's coming from. Again, you walk in there and a gang member is all tagged up or whatever. That's not going to make you cry.
Yeah.
But a child or even a woman, anything, a young man, whatever it might be, and there's every kind of death in there that you can. And there's traffic accident victims, there's suicide victims, and there's murder victims. There's and natural death sometimes.
Jay, I can't imagine a city morgue. I don't think I could handle it.
Oh, it's unreal.
I lived a very blessed life where I saw the dead bodies I saw growing up were always super old in a coffin with makeup on. That was. So when I was a police officer, the first time I saw someone younger dead, it rattled me it really upset me.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. I remember the first, and again, I was only about 23 years old, the first policeman that I saw get killed.
Oh, jeez.
He wasn't dead when I saw him, but he looked like he was dead. They pulled him out of his car to rush him to the hospital. And that was the most, it was almost like a out-of-body experience. You could kind of feel the blood draining from your body, and it's not something I had really braced myself for very well.
Yeah.
When you're working homicide, first of all, if you're working homicide in Los Angeles, you're probably already a seasoned detective, let alone police officer. You've seen a lot of death. You've seen a lot of blood.
Right.
Not going to be a whole lot that you haven't seen. But when you go to a scene like what you just got through talking about, and you see these people that are burned beyond recognition, and the way they died, and then when you have one of the three criminals that did it describe the whole thing to you, because that was part of our case. I'll tell you, man, it's it's not for everybody. That's for sure. I had a tough time with it, but again, you keep going. Your motivation to keep going is to bring some closure to the family.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it's about, And again, that makes you feel really good when you can do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't always get to do it, but it's part of the deal, but your heart just, it breaks.
Yeah,
your heart
absolutely.
breaks for anybody. I remember one of my most, besides that one of the homicides I had that brought me the most personal pleasure to solve was a Skid Row, literally, murder, a dispute over a suitcase or something, and one transient stabbed another to death.
That's going to be so hard to solve.
Oh, it is. I mean,
they don't live anywhere.
Oh, you've got 500 people standing out there and nobody saw anything.
Right.
That's how it rolls. And then if you do get somebody to see something, good luck keeping track of them. You're better off if they get arrested for something or in jail. At least you know where they're at.
Right.
But anyway, we got lucky on that one as well. And the victim's mother, who was from, they were from Jamaica, she operated a furniture store down in South Los Angeles. And when it was all said and done, she gave me a big hug and said she'd never forget me. And, because I don't think she expected for us to care, because her son was a quote unquote nobody. Well, he's a human being,
Yeah.
So I don't like it when I hear police officers anywhere, get maligned for not caring, for being callous. I mean, you have to laugh sometimes to keep from crying.
Sure. Yeah.
You know how that goes.
Yeah.
But
the gallows humor.
They don't think police officers care. They need to look a little deeper,
Absolutely. What do you do for like we were talking about that, how it affects you there? What do you do to unwind, like when you were on the job?
Well, I've always been into exercise a lot. I was a runner back in my younger days. I can't run anymore because I've got 2 fake knees now, but running was always a big outlet for me.
They're saying that is like the number one thing, exercise.
I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, if I was kind of one of those addicted runners, if I didn't run that day, I was a miserable human being to be around.
Okay.
Not always, but I try to do 3, 5, 7 miles a day, and it just runner's high is a real phenomenon. I mean,
Sure.
I haven't felt it in a long time.
Yeah.
Now I ride a bike, or elliptical machine or whatever, but exercise was a big thing, and my family was the other thing. I mean, I've always advocated, especially with, I don't know about females, I can't speak for them, but for male officers, especially the young ones, it's very easy to get caught up in hey, let's go out and have a drink after work, and let's go do this and go do that. And the next thing you know, alcohol could be your outlet, as opposed to a faithful, loyal companion,
right.
wife or whatever. And then when your kids come along, I mean, that personally, I mean, when I retired, I remember saying to the people that were there that, look, I want my identity to be as a father and a grandfather and a husband, not as who I was on LAPD. That's gone. That's done.
Right.
And that was my balance. And I knew plenty of guys that slept, ate, and drank police work 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that quite often crack, because you have to have an outlet somehow.
Right. Or they retire and drop dead because it's.
Yeah, I like to fish. I like to hunt. All things outdoors, camping.
When I met you met Jay about a year and a half ago, and you definitely have for an LA guy, you have a country vibe to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I attribute that to my upbringing. Like I said,
that's cool.
I had a very unique upbringing as a kid I was born in 54, but, most of the life I can remember was in the 60s,
Right.
And like I say, my dad and I raised cattle. We butchered cattle, ate our cattle, and we had that kind of farm life going on. I had responsibilities and chores and a lot of things I wish kids could get these days.
Absolutely.
I think there's a real healthy side to all of that.
Absolutely. You see where your food comes from. And
sure. Yeah. And
cycle of life, the whole thing.
Absolutely, man. And kids these days want to sit and look at telephones or iPads or whatever the hell it might be, and that's fine. They need to have that technology side as well nowadays.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to blend it a little bit too.
Yeah.
I like to expose my grandkids and their friends to as much of the outdoors as I can, anytime I can.
No, man, sometimes I see your some posts on social media, and you do it right, man. You're like out there on the plains, and
it's rewarding.
Drive the truck, and then you take the trailer off the truck and hook it to the four-wheeler and go even further. That is awesome, man.
It is. It's fun. I love the outdoors. Like I said, I can't get too much of the mountains or lakes, the ocean, whatever. I'd live out there if I could feasibly do it.
You could find you a small town. You could be the sheriff there.
Oh man, yeah, I'd be Barney Five probably.
Jay, do you have any parting wisdom to give to someone who wants to be a police officer, or maybe young officers on the job, candidates?
Police work today in 2018 is so different than what I did back in the 70s, 80s, and even in the 90s, the crux of my career. But everything is perspective. Now I investigate backgrounds for people who want to be police officers. Right now I'm assigned to the fire side, but either way. And I always tell them the same thing. Look, you have to be so much smarter than I was in 1978 or something. For a mistake that I would make of the heart nowadays as a police officer, you could end up being put in jail or lose your home in a lawsuit or whatever it might be. There used to be some wiggle room for error in police work. And again, I'm only speaking for the Los Angeles area because I'd never been a policeman anywhere else and haven't really lived in any other part of the country.
It just so happens to be one of the most harshly criticized
Absolutely.
places.
Well, it's a big department. It's, the LA Times, Los Angeles Times has been an enemy, as far as I'm concerned, of LAPD ever since I was a young police officer. And they make good stories. Let's face it, a police scandal sells. It's like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. There's nothing more people want to hear about. But my best advice for them is, look, if you want to do this, go out and investigate it if you think you want to do it. Go out and go on ride-alongs. The department has a program for that now. They have the mentor program here, of course, for people who want to come on and get to know what it is about, because it's not anything like what you see on TV. You're going to spend a lot of sleepless nights when you get off at 4 o'clock in the morning. You have to be at court at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
And that involves going home and getting dressed, putting your suit on and coming back to court. It's not glamorous like they make it look on TV. They can't show you reality on TV.
Sure.
But if you're going to do it, be faithful to that badge. Don't tarnish that badge. I have absolutely no sympathy in my heart for any police officer that turns into a criminal and thinks he can hide behind a badge. As far as I'm concerned, there should be a very special law for those folks, the few that I've known in my life or known of. And as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't be breathing. I mean, to gain to be in a position of public trust and to violate that, to me, is as serious a crime as you can commit, whatever
Absolutely.
it might be, whether you're stealing their money, whatever it might be. I don't care. So be faithful to it. But it's a great career. LAPD has so many things to offer. So does a lot of police departments. I've got a son-in-law who's a police officer on a small agency. He's still gotten to do a variety of things, and he loves it. So it's rewarding. It's challenging. If you don't want to be criticized, go deliver water for Sparklets or something, because you're going to get criticized. You're going to get criticized by your own and everybody out there. So it comes with the territory. You're going to get sued. You're going to be witness in court. Look at it as a challenge. Take it as a challenge and get as good as you can get at it. Do a lot of it. That's how you get good at it. It's
Absolutely.
fun. It's a great career. Yeah, I still recommend it for people.
Okay.
Despite the challenges.
That's awesome. Jay, those are great words of wisdom. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, man.
Oh, glad to do it for you, Steve. Anytime. Right. Glad you had me.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out the podcast. If you've been enjoying the podcast and you want to show some support for the show, you could go to iTunes and click subscribe, rate, and review the show. That would be fantastic. If you want to reach out and ask any questions, or if you're a law enforcement officer or a retired law enforcement officer and you'd like to be interviewed, that would be great too. You can reach me at thingspolicesee@gmail.com. Again, thank you for checking out the show, and I'll see you next time.